The room was silent except for the soft hum of the lab's ventilation. Rows of glass beakers reflected the morning light like tiny prisms. A new science teacher had arrived just a week ago, a tall, calm black woman named Ms. Harris, whose quiet composure carried a weight most couldn't define. That morning, a tense moment unfolded. A senior student, notorious for picking on others and testing boundaries, fixed his glare on her. His friends shifted nervously, sensing something brewing. None of them knew that beneath Ms. Harris's calm presence was a life shaped by years in the military. What began as an ordinary day in the lab was about to become a powerful lesson, one that the bully would never forget. Ms. Harris had been teaching at Jefferson High for less than 2 weeks, but the way she commanded the classroom had already drawn whispers. Her posture was straight yet approachable, her voice measured but firm. She was the kind of teacher who made students feel both challenged and respected. The science lab itself was spotless, every beaker and pipette neatly in place. The school had needed a strong teacher after the last one resigned abruptly, unable to handle the rowdy seniors. The principal hoped Ms. Harris could restore order and inspire the students. Among those seniors was Chad Whitmore, a lanky 18-year-old who had grown up with a sense of entitlement and a history of making snide remarks toward classmates who didn't look or live like him. His friends followed his lead, more out of fear than loyalty. Chad had noticed the new teacher's calm but unwavering demeanor and mistook it for weakness. To him, respect was something he demanded, not something he offered. That week, he began testing Ms. Harris, interrupting her lessons with sarcastic comments and trying to provoke her with jokes that carried an ugly edge. Most teachers in the past either ignored Chad or lost their temper, which only fueled his behavior. Ms. Harris, however, met each disruption with the same even tone and piercing, unblinking gaze, the kind that made even the most defiant students hesitate. In the cafeteria and the hallways, Chad started spreading remarks about the new lady who acts like a soldier, not realizing how close he was to the truth. His friends laughed, but some sensed that there was something about Ms. Harris that didn't quite fit the image of an ordinary teacher. It wouldn't take long for them to find out why. The first few incidents were subtle. A muttered comment as Ms. Harris walked by. A deliberately dropped glass slide during a lab experiment meant to break her concentration. Each time she responded calmly, instructing the students to clean up and continue without losing her composure. The other students began to notice. They saw how Ms. Harris never raised her voice, how her eyes seemed to assess the room, much like a field commander might scan a terrain. There was discipline in the way she organized the lab, but also patience, qualities that quietly demanded respect. Chad, however, felt challenged. He thrived on provoking reactions and couldn't stand that Ms. Harris wasn't giving him one. To him, her calm was a sign that she was easy to push around. He began escalating, rolling his eyes during lectures, talking over her instructions, and tossing careless remarks that skirted the edge of overt racism. He called her ma'am in a tone that mocked rather than respected. One afternoon, while the class prepared for an experiment involving chemical reactions, Chad deliberately spilled a small container of blue solution across his desk. The liquid spread like a stain of defiance, and a few students gasped, anticipating a burst of anger. Ms. Harris didn't flinch. She picked up a towel, placed it calmly on the spill, and told Chad in a steady voice to start over, adding that next time he should focus on the work rather than the drama. The quiet authority in her words unsettled him more than any yelling could have. By the third week, the tension reached a point where the whole class could feel it. Even Chad's friends were growing uneasy, sensing that his confrontations were about to cross a line. The breaking point came during a lab safety drill. The students were practicing proper procedures when Chad muttered loudly about how people like her should stick to something simpler. A few students stiffened. One girl dropped her pen. Ms. Harris's response was a slight tilt of her head, the kind of controlled movement that suggested she'd heard, measured, and decided not to dignify the comment with anger. Instead, she instructed the class to proceed. That evening, Chad complained to his friends that the new teacher acted like she's some kind of drill sergeant. He meant it as an insult. What he didn't realize was that the comparison wasn't far off the mark. The real confrontation happened on a rainy Thursday morning. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and disinfectant as students filed into the lab. Chad came in late, muttering something under his breath as he slammed his notebook on the table. Ms. Harris continued setting up a demonstration with precise, unhurried movements. Her calmness only made Chad more restless. As the experiment began, Chad deliberately interrupted with a mocking question about whether she even knew what she was doing. A hush fell over the room. Every eye turned toward Ms. Harris. She set down the beaker, turned slowly to face Chad, and looked him straight in the eye. Her voice was even, but it carried a weight that silenced the giggles in the back of the room. "Mr. Whitmore, if you're done performing for your friends, let's return to the lesson." Chad shifted in his seat but pressed on. He made a comment that crossed the line, one that revealed not only disrespect but also prejudice. A few students gasped. One even whispered, "Oh no!" For a long second, Ms. Harris didn't speak. She stood there, her posture steady, her gaze unwavering. Then, in a calm voice, she began to recount a short, factual story. How in her previous career she had been responsible for leading teams in situations far more challenging than a classroom. She didn't boast or raise her voice. She described experiences that revealed her military background, the years of discipline, the training in crisis management, the resilience that came from it. The classroom was silent. Chad's expression shifted from defiance to unease. The realization that he'd been trying to provoke someone who had stood firm under far greater pressures seemed to sink. Ms. Harris concluded by reminding the class, that respect is the foundation of any learning environment, and that courage isn't about loud words or intimidation, but about discipline and character. The lesson resumed, but the atmosphere had changed. The students sat straighter. Even Chad avoided eye contact for the rest of the period. In the weeks that followed, Chad's behavior underwent a change. The snide remarks and interruptions disappeared. He still had a rebellious streak, but it no longer targeted Ms. Harris. Instead, he focused on the coursework, sometimes with quiet determination, as if trying to prove something to himself. The other students noticed the difference. They began to mirror Ms. Harris's calm discipline, speaking more thoughtfully and taking their experiments more seriously. The lab, once a place of tension and disruption, became a space where learning and respect coexisted. One afternoon after class, a few students lingered behind. They asked Ms. Harris if the stories she'd shared were real. She smiled gently and nodded, saying only that the most important lessons aren't always in the textbook. Word spread quietly through the school. The new science teacher wasn't just another instructor. She was someone who had seen the world, faced challenges far beyond the classroom, and carried herself with the kind of dignity that comes from real experience. For Chad, the transformation was more personal. He never apologized outright, but his actions spoke louder than words. He began to show up on time, asked genuine questions about the experiments, and even defended a younger student from a hallway taunt one afternoon. The incident became an unspoken turning point, a reminder that appearances can deceive and that underestimating someone based on prejudice can lead to humiliation. As the semester drew to a close, Ms. Harris ended her final lecture not with equations or lab notes, but with a simple statement that lingered in the minds of her students. Strength isn't about who can shout the loudest. It's about who can stay steady when it matters most. The story of that semester became more than a tale of a bully silenced. It became a testament to resilience and respect, and a quiet challenge to anyone quick to judge others by surface appearances. And as viewers reflect on this story, they might ask themselves how many people around us carry untold strengths we never bother to see, and how often do we underestimate them because of our own assumptions?